Is this the hand of a dead man? How does the index finger of a dead hand come to be positioned like that, if not somehow by its own agency? Is it possible that this wounded hand has come back to life, reanimated as if making a benediction? A resurrected finger, a reassuring touch. And there you have the entire arc of the story in a single detail. Birth, death, and resurrection all at once. Michelangelo presents us with an image that embodies the hope of the Madonna and Child and the tragedy of the Pieta, all at the same time. The beginning, the end, and everything beyond that, all in the detail of a hand. Consider some other hands by Michelangelo. The familiar hands and head of David appear strangely larger than they should be. This emphasizes their importance in the story, even from a great distance. The sling, the rock, and the gaze at an approaching enemy. And if David is this colossal, then imagine how big Goliath must be. One also finds a similar play of scale and proportion amongst the many details of the Sistine Chapel, a carefully calibrated arrangement of figures which altogether serve to tell the story of creation, from the simple to the complex. For example, Jonah, at one end near the altar, is almost twice the size of Zechariah at the other end. More figures populate the far end, creating a more complex composition around Zechariah, requiring a reduction of scale of the individual figures. But the image of man and the image of God near the center are nearly the same size. The old masters, like Michelangelo, study proportion and scale to determine the relative size of one element to another, and of the scale of every element to the whole. Michelangelo, like most artists of his generation, learned his art by making copies of the great masters who came before, by studying the proportion and scale of the works he admired. This is an early copy by Michelangelo. It is believed that he was a teenager when he painted it. On the left is his version of The Temptation of St. Anthony by German artist Martin Schongauer. Your assignment is to create a copy of the creation of Adam, using the grid to help with proportion. Then, choose another image to copy. Carefully consider how all the elements in the image relate to one another. Consider proportion and scale, consider how all the details relate to the whole. After you've made a copy of the creation of Adam, search the internet or visit a local library. Take time to select an image by an artist that appeals to you, and then print it out. Your image should be big enough to clearly see the detail. On your copy, and not in the library book, use a ruler to lay out a grid on the image. Then lay out another grid in your sketchbook to map out the appropriate proportions of every part to every other part. Use the lines as points of reference and adjust your proportions as needed. Making copies of great works of art through intentional observation improves visual memory by translating what the eye sees into marks that the hand makes. Make multiple copies of the same work to understand it better. After you feel comfortable with your sense of proportion, try it without the grid.